Welcome back, or welcome for the first time. Thanks for joining us here at the Hilt Academy. This YouTube channel is the free side of the Hilt Academy, high impact leadership training. You can check out the link that we've got in the description below to see all the courses, the full description of all the courses that we offer for leaders and managers and supervisors. We've got courses about how to become a resilient and essential leader, how to have great supervisory skills, how to create a strategic plan, how to have great meetings all the time, no matter what, how to build a high-performing team, and all kinds of other great stuff. It's fun. I think you'll find something valuable for you and for your teams if you check that site out. So this video is part 2 in our Hire Smart series. In the last video, it was all about hiring for competencies and always be recruiting so that you can keep the best talent in front of you for your organization. If you're always recruiting, you'll have higher quality candidates than if you only recruit when you need to or after you need to. If you don't know what core competencies that the person will need to succeed in the job that you're hiring for, and then you hire them, they will not succeed. Pretty straightforward, right? If you're not clear about the requisite competencies that are needed, and you think anyone with a smile will do, you're going to be in bad shape. So you get the point? Hire for competencies, train for skills. Now this video is about the interview and the selection process. Here are a few things that we've learned. First, once someone meets the minimum requirements for the job on paper or digital paper, if you want to think about it that way, then you're going to take them to the next step. A little bit of a sidebar thought here. Make sure in this process, before you winnow people out, that you give grace here. The words on paper or on a digital paper, so to speak, don't always capture what you need. So if you can create job postings that have phrases like, you need this kind of experience or similar experience, this kind of education or equivalent education, something like that, so that people can see that there's the way to get those competencies in different ways than what you might be advertising. When you use those phrases, it works very, very well. And so then once they check the box, the basic boxes, then you're going to want to email the candidate and set up a phone interview. Tell them what you're going to ask them in advance so that they can prepare. Tell them you're going to ask them what they would like to know about the job, and then they will, of course, hopefully show up prepared. If they don't, that's good for you to find out now too. So here's the second idea. You may want to opt for a Zoom interview. We prefer this in many positions because we get to see how a person interacts a little bit with technology. Are they comfortable enough to use technology? There aren't a lot of jobs that don't have communication technology attached to them, and the expectation of a person to be able to use that technology, whether it's on their phone out on a job site or whether it's on a nice computer screen in their office or anything in between, most people really need to be able to use that skill set. You'll also be able to see in a Zoom interview how seriously they're taking this. So here's the third idea. You're going to want in this first interview, if you want to call it that, to ask 3 questions. So the 3 questions are, 1, what would you like to know about this organization? 2, what do you think this job would actually be like day to day? And 3, what personal traits and experience makes you interested in this job? You're going to want to tell them that those are the 3 questions you're going to ask them in advance, all right? So the call or the video call should be just long enough to get the candidate to relax and to see how he or she communicates when they're relaxed, and then to get at those 3 questions. If you can, on the spot, if you can decide right on the spot after that 15 or 20 minute conversation via Zoom or phone or both, if you can decide on the spot whether or not you want to take that person to the next step, then tell them right on the spot. Tell them, all right, here's the next step, and it's an in-person conversation, and it's best in our experience to not call these interviews, although I've been using that term in this video and in the previous video. When you interact with candidates, you probably want to call it a conversation. It helps change a little bit about what they're going to expect. Of course, it's an interview, but it should be a conversation back and forth. Remember, you're not just interviewing them, they should be interviewing you. That sounds more like a conversation, all right? So if you want to move them on to the next step, tell them right away and tell them what to expect. If you're unsure and you want to think about it a little bit, you're not ready to tell them you want them to go to the next step, then instead of saying, here's the next step, I'm going to reach out to you, here's the date, right? Instead of doing that, say, our next step is to reach out to you and other candidates in an email and give it a few days before you respond, all right? If the next step is an extended interview or conversation by video, driven only because of logistics, for example, you don't want to fly a person from Seattle to Orlando, Florida, if you're not very sure yet, you want an extended conversation with them. If it is going to be a video one just for logistic reasons, then tell them that too, and that's very appropriate to do that. So then schedule it and send out the questions and the themes and the competencies that you're going to be discussing to them in an email in the next step. So that way they can be prepared. Don't surprise them with themes and with the basic general questions. Don't come in and feel like it's a prosecutorial kind of conversation where you're going to try to catch them in some weird way of thinking or some weird answers. Don't come up with weird questions either, right? They should all be competency-based questions. Tell us about a time when you, all right? Don't come up with questions like, what kind of dog would you be if you were a dog, right? What does that tell you? That's dumb, all right? So although you do want to ask weird questions just because it's entertaining, it's actually counterproductive, all right? Here's the fourth idea. In the interview conversation itself, right out of the gate, set the candidate at ease. Have some sort of fun warm-up kind of question that's not like what kind of dog would you be, but something more appropriate. Like we often use the question, hey, tell us about your cell phone. How do you use your cell phone? Why did you choose that kind of cell phone over that kind of cell phone? And that gets them to relax a little bit, and it's kind of a sly way to find out if they are a person who's comfortable with using technology. If they pull out their old Motorola flip phone with an extendable antenna and they don't even know how to turn that on, and it's a high-tech job you're putting them in, for example, you probably want to move on from that person, right? Also, once you get them kind of warmed up in the conversation and you're warmed up as well, then list the competencies that you're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about curiosity and about grit and about velocity of thought, etc. Here's the competencies, and they know that because that was in the job posting. That was said to them up front, and you're going to tell them this again. You sent them this, so they know this is what you're going to be talking about. So in the interview conversation itself, say, remember, here are our competencies we're going to be discussing. So let's begin with the first one. Can you tell us a story about when you demonstrated the blank, fill in the competency? When did you demonstrate velocity of thought, where you really got to work at thinking through a problem? There was a sophisticated thing you were facing, and you really thought about it and understood it quickly. When did you demonstrate grit? When did you demonstrate velocity of work, for example? All right? Do it all out in the open. You're not trying to sneak up and surprise somebody. Tell them also you're taking notes. That's important. I'm going to be taking notes here because I just want to have a really good memory of our conversation so that they don't look at you and wonder, where are you when you're taking notes? And also create follow-up questions throughout the process. You've come with questions about the competencies. Good, that's great. But then one of the best follow-up questions that we like to use is, okay, so you said this. Could you tell me some more about that story? Could you tell me some more about that experience? That's your question, right? So this is very important. This might be the most important part. With each of the competencies that you talk about, ask for the contact name and information of a person who was in that story with him or with her, so that you can reach out to them and see what their perspective was. This is very important. Here's the fifth idea. Remember that the job that a person is applying for or interviewing for is not a job where they sit with strangers and are interviewed in a panel all day long. So cut some people some slack. If someone doesn't interview well, that's okay, unless their job is to sit and be interviewed all day long by people, right? But nobody has that kind of job, right? Cut them some slack if they don't interview very well. That's okay. It's not about the interview. It's about the conversation that is a result of it, and it's about getting names of people who have been through competency experiences with them. All right, here's the sixth idea. Include 2 or 3 other people in those conversations, not just yourself, but at least another couple of people, because they will help you overcome any confirmation bias that you may also have. They'll give you a perspective that's very important and help them, of course, know in advance that we're interviewing for competencies. We're selecting based on competencies. Here's the 7th idea. Give room for the candidate to ask questions. Remember, this is a 2-way interview, and tell them that up front. It's back and forth. Don't dominate the conversation. Invite them to ask questions. Here's the 8th idea. Wrap up this interview conversation with a thank you. We appreciate this, and tell them what the next steps are. Take notes. Make sure you've taken notes. And then the 9th thing to do is when the person steps out of that conversation, to take a few minutes and take notes about what you think. Watch carefully for what we've come to call the halo effect. The halo effect has been the cause of many really bad hires over the years. The halo effect is simply that if someone is really good at one thing, you expect them to be good at everything else. If someone, in this case, is really good at interviewing, you expect them to be good at time management. And that has nothing to do with our interview, right? Or if someone looks like someone that you really like and have loved working with for years, and they have the similar kind of affect about them, and they kind of same physical features and maybe even personality, and you like that person, you will think that they're going to be great to work with. That's called the halo effect. There's also a reverse halo effect, which is like the horns effect. That's if somebody is really bad at something, you think they're going to be really bad at everything else. So if you at the very end take notes, talk to each other about this, this will help overcome the halo effect. All right, so what about the reference checks themselves? This is crucial. We don't know what else to call the reference checks. Maybe they're competency checks or something like that. But in reality, the reference checks are the conversations you have with people whose name and contact information you got from the candidate about a specific competency. So they tell you, here's the competency, here's the story I had that demonstrates the competency of grit or the competency of complex problem solving, something like that. Here's the person, or here are some people that I experienced that with. When you reach out to that person, you're going to talk with them about that experience that they had with Biff, the candidate. Interview them more deeply even about it than you might have done with the candidate himself or herself. When you think about this, and you have a bunch of decision chips you're going to put out there on the table about whether or not to offer this person a position, maybe 8 or 10% of those decision chips are in how they present themselves in the interview process, and 20% of that 80% of that should come from the stories that people tell you about what it's like to work with them through the lens of their competencies. This is so important. If you don't do this, you deserve the kind of person that you hire. With all due respect. Bless your heart. Okay, there you have it. Take your time. Get stories that demonstrate competencies. Pay attention to any red flags in the process itself. For example, the candidate did nothing to familiarize himself or herself with the job or with the organization. Red flag. The candidate is motivated by leaving the current job. I just got to get away from this current job. Red flag. Maybe the candidate showed up late, significantly late, not a hot minute late, but late. Notice that? That's a red flag. Or maybe the candidate doesn't have anyone who can tell you stories about what it was like to work with them where they demonstrated those competencies, or what it was like to be around them in any kind of an environment, maybe not even job related, where they demonstrated those competencies. They don't have people, right? So, well, red flag, all right? The 5th red flag that I'm listing in this whole group is they don't have a sense of humor. If they don't, after they've relaxed a little bit, if they don't start to bubble up with a little bit of a smile and a little bit of a sense of humor and relax enough to enjoy the process, you probably have a problem, all right? That's a red flag. And the 6th red flag on this list of 6 is that they are rude to people that they put on a little bit of a lower rung than themselves in life or in the organization. Watch for that, pick that up, and do not hire that kind of person. You will regret it. All right, so once you've determined that a particular candidate has the competencies that you need, and that he or she will fit well with the personalities of those with whom they will be working most closely, and that seems like a good fit, then make the job offer. Here's a sidebar. The competencies that I think are the most important to team fit are: 1, velocity of work. You can't have slow people working with fast people. It does not work. They'll drive each other crazy. You can't have highly energetic people working with lazy people. Nope, it'll blow up in your face every time. No matter how nice they are, it won't work. Second, look for the velocity of thought. Are they quick thinkers? Do they get it quickly? Third, look for grit. And fourth, look for humor. If those 4 are not aligned, an individual will not work out on that team. It won't work. There's nothing you can do to save it, no matter how nice they are, no matter how good their skills are. Okay, there you go. Have some fun with this. Interviewing is kind of hard, but don't make it harder than it needs to be by hurrying through it. And don't make a horrible mistake by not reaching out to those references, if you want to call them that, about stories and getting into the stories of how that person demonstrated their competencies. There you go. In our next video, we're going to talk about how to onboard someone that you've hired so that they're set up for success. It's very different than what you might think. See you in the next video. Have a great day.